All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into the next installment of the Lunch and Learn webinar series from Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress. My name is Eric Pearson. I am the director of the Main Street Center at Pattern for Progress, and I will be the host today for the webinar. As always, I would like to take a moment to thank Ulster Savings Bank for making this free webinar possible through their generous support. So today's topic is houses of worship and downtown revitalization. We chose this topic because throughout the region, we are seeing several examples of vacant or underutilized churches, religious buildings, often located in our downtowns and our main streets. So we wanted to take an opportunity to explore how these types of buildings can potentially be repurposed to better serve the evolving needs of a community. So we're going to hear today from two speakers, and we'll learn about how there are various challenges and opportunities that are unique to these types of buildings. And we are fortunate today to be joined by Jeremy Ellenbogen, President and CEO of Ellenbogen Creative Media, and Kevin O'Connor, the CEO of RUPCO. Kevin and Jeremy are going to walk us through two different projects: the transformation of a church into office space in downtown Saugerties, and the transformation of a church into a commercial and community service hub in the city of Newburgh. Before I hand it over to them, just some quick housekeeping notes. Um, in terms of the flow for today's webinar, we're going to start with both presentations from Kevin and Jeremy, followed up with some discussion and an opportunity for Q&A from all of you in the audience. Questions can be submitted at any time via the chat feature on Zoom. And when we get to that portion of the webinar, I'll try my best to get to all the questions that I can. And we'll be ending the webinar at 1 p.m. So let's see. Last thing is that this webinar is being recorded. So the slides from our presenters, as well as a recording of the webinar itself, will be posted to Pattern's website in the next couple of days. So if you want to share the webinar or check out some of the slides that you want to review, those will be available for you again on Pattern's website. So without further ado, I think I will going to hand it over to Jeremy first to introduce himself and tell you all about his project in Saugerties.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Jeremy Ellenbogen. I am a film and media guy is my main background, but I've also been in the developing process. I've developed some buildings in Kingston into a media center, and more recently, the church building at 32 Partition Street in Saugerties. And that's what's pictured here. So we've converted it from worship to a workspace. And boy, it was a very interesting project. That's what I'm going to be sharing with you this afternoon. Um, as you may know, there are so many different churches that are available out there. Many of them are falling in disrepair, and the buildings themselves are just absolutely gorgeous. And if you look at the integrity of these buildings, between the stained glass and all of the architectural significance, they're buildings that you most likely could not build or even afford to build in today's standards. So a little bit of history about this building that we converted. It was the First Baptist Church of Saugerties. It was originally built in 1890. The original building was 7,500 square feet, and it did remain a church until 2021, when my wife and I purchased the building and converted it. You can see on the right side, back in 1960, a school building was added. They just basically slapped this building right onto the end of this gorgeous church. And it is unfortunate. Obviously, they needed classroom space. And they thought that, oh, yeah, we're going to put this square building attached to it. And that's exactly what they did. But it did add 10,000 square foot of space onto this church. So, that's basically what it looked like. So around the 1990s, the church really started to the membership declined pretty significantly. And this happens in churches all over the country. It is unfortunate. Not as many people are going to church these days, and the buildings, the number of members just decline over and over. Um, Finally, just around the time that we purchased the building, it was finally down to 9 members. So then you ask yourself, how can you survive on 9 members? And paying for all the expenses of what a church costs to run. So they decide to get smart. You can see pictured here is like a TV studio, which they tried to rent it out. They tried many other things to do with this building. They tried to add classroom space, and they tried to even add a gym to it to help generate additional revenue to pay expenses. So eventually, what happened was the building just they could not afford to keep it any longer. You can see the building from this aerial shot here. They finally, in 2016, listed the property for sale. It was for sale for over $1 million. There weren't any bites on it. Many people couldn't figure out what to do with it. And then eventually they lowered the price, and we made an offer to them, and we did wind up purchasing the building for $282,500 back in January of 2020. Now, obviously, everybody knows what was going on in 2020, the pandemic. Probably not a good time to be purchasing a building of any sort. What our vision for it was, originally, we were, as crazy as it sounds, we were going to create the first church brewery in New York State. But with everything that happened in the pandemic, we decided to pivot and go back to what we really knew, and that's commercial office space. So we nixed the idea of a brewery, and then we decided to make a space that was affordable for entrepreneurs. And we also wanted to keep the character of this gorgeous building and provide all these modern amenities, things that people need in an office space environment, and spaces that were affordable. I mean, our spaces start at around $450 a month, all inclusive, and they range from 150 to 500 square feet. So the rents are affordable. We wanted something that was going to be very energy efficient, and also carve out a portion of the space to be used for events and public use, which we also did. This is one of the public use spaces in the building, the way it is now. So yeah, it's there's no question that these church buildings are absolutely beautiful. So, what are some challenges that we ran into? Well, there were a lot of them, I can tell you, but we were able to navigate through them. Now, in many cases with churches, they're often located in residential areas. Now, this was right on the border. This was in an R3 zoning, so we did have to get a special use permit in order to operate an office space. We had also talked about potentially doing um, residential space, but that really wasn't a possibility. So we did take all these things. Permitting does take time. We had a massive labor shortage, as you know, during the pandemic, and there was also a material shortage. How do you even find materials like wood and plywood and things like that? And if you can even find it, the cost of those had really escalated. One other thing is that because in order to make room for parking, to fit into the parking requirements that the village of Saugerties has, we had to keep parking on site. So we were forced to tear down the school building, which frankly we didn't think looked good anyway. And it was the roof was leaking. It did have a lot of issues. And in doing so, and when you tear down a building, you have to have a full discovery, and unfortunately, we discovered asbestos in the building, which we had to completely remediate, which obviously, yeah, increased costs a little bit. We also had to meet energy code, accessibility, as I said, parking requirements. And one critical thing that a lot of people don't know is that in order to purchase a building that is for sale by a church or a worship institution. It had to be approved by the New York State Attorney General, and that is done through a process, with attorneys, and that is the seller has to take care of that, or the church that's selling it. So that can get a little tricky, but we did navigate it. And there were many things that we had to do in the planning process, site plans, special use permits, as I said, demolition plans, architectural drawings, all these things. We had to do a lot of behind the scenes before we put a shovel in the ground or start to build anything. Um, it's interesting. The concept of the church that we wanted to do is to create basically use the hull of the church, which was beautifully made. It was in excellent condition. Everything was very well constructed, and we decided that we wanted to build basically a box within a box, which I'll show you when you see some of the video of the time lapse. But we were creating 32 office spaces inside the hull of this basically 7,500 square foot church. And you'll see some of the challenges that we have with that, including things like the sloping floor. How do you deal with a floor that is designed for like a theater where it's sloped? So we had to change floor height and elevations, and we got very creative. Our architect, we certainly put him to his full capacity to figure out some of these challenges. So here you can see some of the work that had to be done. So, unfortunately, the majority of the mechanicals all were routed over to the school building, which we had to demolish. So we had to restore all of those utilities, including water, sewer, electric, cable, all that stuff had to get moved back to where it originally was. Here you can see us knocking the church building down. I'm sorry, the school building down, being very careful not to disturb the structure of the beautiful church. So piece by piece, it took one day. We were able to knock it down with about four different machines, each holding walls up, and it's yeah, it was definitely a project. It was a well-built building, and you can see it does open up the building, the lot quite nicely for us to be able to use that for parking. And you can see the demolition process. Yes, it was a mess for a few days, but you can see how much better the church looks now after it's exposed. And here you can see the pile of rubble that was left in its wake. Um, but anyway, that went smoothly, and you can see the site work that's being done. We had to retain all of the water from the parking lot, so we had to put retention ponds and five giant dry wells put in, as well as buried electric and mechanicals. So it definitely was an involved process. And as far as the construction process, there were so many pieces to this. Of course, the roof repair, this is a slate roof, so you have to find a slate roof artist to be able to come and do this. We had to source the slate material from a special quarry in Vermont to match it. We had to have the bluestone hand chiseled to match the existing stonework that was done. And yeah, that was definitely a challenging process. You can see here some of the brickwork that had been shedding off that we wind up restoring. Woodwork. This is on the right side is the picture of the actual hull of the church before we started cutting into it and harvesting the materials out of it. So this is some of the process you're seeing here is the time lapse of all of the walls getting built inside the hull of this church. And we wound up building 3 stories inside the church, keeping the walls completely intact, keeping the integrity of all the stained glass, which was in absolute perfect shape, beautiful stained glass. You couldn't possibly even make it today, the way this place was built. But we did use a lot of lumber, and both steel and wood lumber, a lot of OSB, over 1,500 sheets of OSB on the flooring, and leveling everything, building 29 office spaces inside this beautiful church, and of course, adding all of um, the modern amenities that people want, including things like, um, our HVAC system. Get this over again here. So you can see how beautiful the stained glass is there. I mean, this is just an example. Some churches have a lot of religious artifacts within the stained glass, but typically these Baptist churches did not, and they're just beautiful colors and not so much religious in any way. Um, the bottom picture there, you can see some of the ductless mini splits. Every single room has its own mini split, which is an enormous energy savings, and it's really what people want, especially with COVID, being able to be on a central, not being on a central system where you're breathing everyone else's air. So the mini splits, provided great comfort for everybody as well as safety and energy efficiency. So, you can see some of the walls going up. We were able to use a lot of the materials that we harvested from the building, including, um, all of the wainscoting and a lot of the moldings. We when we took it off, we did replace a lot of the molding and use that throughout the building. So you have this kind of juxtaposition between, um, paying homage to what it was back in 1890 to a modern building. And we really made best use of those types of materials. You can see here, we had to put two elevators in the building, again, to meet accessibility codes. We did reuse a lot of the flooring, as I said, wainscoting. You can see some of the finishing work that was done here. And this is some video of more of the finished product. You can see the stained glass. We did everything black and a nice off-white. You can see again the stained glass everywhere. And the also nice thing about this is that every single room in the building has glass on the hallways, and each one of them have a visual sight line to some stained glass. So the entire building, you can walk around the whole perimeter of it, and then you can, see the stained glass from pretty much wherever you are, including even in the stair towers. Everything had to be done in fireproof glass. You can see some of the glass windows there on the left side. Look at the beautiful arches, the archways that were done. We added all very modern lighting fixtures. We built common areas on the second floor mezzanine, um, and you can see how the dome of the church, which still is another 20 feet above the top of the second floor where you're looking now, top mezzanine level, you can look right over and see the stained glass at all four corners of the building. So, we definitely mix that modern and also the beauty of the stained glass. There's one of the bathrooms, again, restoring the brick and making it into something that is really special. Here you can see some of the finished rooms, what they look like. Again, you can see the windows. Those windows look out into the hall or the perimeter of the church, where you can see stained glass and see lighting. Even the doors, all the doors are also, although they're fireproof, they're also fire rated glass. So we really added that. One of the very interesting features of this church, you have 12-foot sliding vertical pocket doors, which if you see the picture on the bottom, those four doors, which are all stained glass, they slide up into the hull of the church. Very, very unique architecture, something you could never build today. And this is one of the three meeting spaces that are in the building that we make available to various organizations that want to see the building and to use it for various events. Uh, so this gives us kind of a timeline, right? So it was we definitely worked extremely hard to get as many people in as possible, as quickly as possible. Um, so we had an accepted offer and a contract on this in February of 2020. Took about a year for all the paperwork to get through, mostly because the pandemic slowed everything down, all the court system. And we finally got the ability to close on the property in January 2021, right smack during the pandemic. We started our demolition and site work between January and March of 21. And between March and July, we did all of the construction and renovation. So we did it in a very quick time. We had our first person occupying the building in August 1st. And as I said, it went quickly. Once we got the building down and it was all hands on deck to get this building finished. So again, the purchase price, $282,500. We did about $250,000 in site work that had to be done, including knocking the building down and repaving the parking lot and putting drainage systems in. And then we spent about $550,000 on construction costs, even despite the very expensive pricing of items. So we came out to about 1.1 million approximately on the whole, total in costs with the property acquisition, legal fees and such. So, I think we did all right. Some of the successes, as I mentioned, the purchase price, our construction timeline. Obviously, there was a need for office space in Saugerties. The pandemic scooped up a lot of office spaces that were currently being used, where people wound up using those for Airbnb, and they were not renting them as commercial office space any longer. So there was a big need for that, which is why before we even opened, we were 75% leased, and then within the first year, we were 100% filled. And at this point, we have a waiting list of about a dozen people who are waiting to get in to 32 partition. We did, an adaptive reuse of this historic building. Again, you could never build something like this today. You couldn't afford it or even find the craftspeople to do a project like this. And it's an icon where hundreds of people had weddings and funerals and masses, and the building has a history that you can't create that any other way. So as people walk down the sidewalks on Partition Street, they see the beauty of this building, and it looks unassuming. Many people don't even know it's an office building, and that's kind of what we wanted, to keep it very low key on the outside and totally different when you walk through those doors. Um, as I mentioned earlier, we were able to provide no parking impact on the village of Saugerties, which is extremely taxed already for parking. If you've ever been through Saugerties, it's very hard to find parking. But we were able to have parking completely on site, and we're close. We're only a half a block away from the main street, Main and Partition Street, which is really the center of town. The one nice thing that the village loves is that this is now a tax generating property, whereas before, when it's a religious entity, there's no tax revenue at all from it. So so anyway, that pretty much ends my presentation. I'd love to anybody who's in the Saugerties area wants to see it, I would be happy to show it off, offer tours whenever, and it was very interesting project. And obviously, I gave you the abridged version just for time's sake, but I we definitely enjoyed it. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeremy. Incredible project. I think we can all agree. So I see there's a couple questions rolling in on the chat. I just wanted to reiterate to those who might have missed my intro. Um, At any time, please feel free to put a question in the chat for either of our speakers. We're gonna go and move on to Kevin's presentation before we hit any of the questions. But so, if you want to drop it in the chat now so you don't forget, and I'll try to maybe, consolidate some questions as best I can and get to as many questions as we can when that time happens. So thank you again, Jeremy, and I think we will turn it over to Kevin now for his presentation.
Hey, am I up, Eric?
Yes, you are. Let me see.
Great.
Yep.
Well, first of all, Jeremy, congratulations on a fantastic project. I do want to come up and take a tour, and I'm particularly enamored with your total budget costs because we have found costs to be, extremely high. We got started a while ago, 8 or 10 years ago, at the invitation of the Newburgh Community Land Bank to come in and do affordable housing in the city. Newburgh had over 1,000 vacant buildings, and so we were able to, in phase one, redo 15 buildings historically, vacant buildings, no gentrification, no pushing people out, all came back as affordable. Phase round two, we did 10 historic buildings for housing. We built housing on 12 vacant lots. And we also were encouraged to, try to bring a community hub to the East End, north of Broadway neighborhood. And the First United Methodist Church, which you see here in the center, next to the Audrey Carey Park, and then the corner building to the left was what we were able to purchase. There's a lot of similarities in our stories here. I know that the first congregation was down to 11. Hold on, wait a minute. Okay. 11 congregants when we purchased the church. So as a not-for-profit, our mission is to create homes, support people, and improve communities. Again, this was our second phase, and really going beyond housing here to try and create a community hub. We have partnered with a local nonprofit, LYNC, and the use that we've come up with is a mix of commercial and community hub, event space, and we also landed for the first time a youth build program for the city of Newburgh. This is one of the buildings that we did as housing, 98 Lander Street. It was almost lost, but we were able to bring it back. And that's how it sits today. This is a building on First Street, 197 First. I apologize for a lot of sirens there. This had a major fire right before we closed and started construction, but we were still able to save it. So Highpoint, which is our name for our renovation. Obviously, the steeple is one of the highest points, if not the highest point, in the city of Newburgh. Was the First Methodist Church. They have a long history in Newburgh. This building, I think, was 1860. And again, by the time they sold it to us, they were down to 11 congregants. Interesting, there was another church right next door to the First United Methodist. This church was, I guess, became vacant and was lost. And today that's the site of the Audrey Carey Park, named after a former mayor of the city of Newburgh. The corner building is a building that we also purchased and own and have restored. And it's part of the Highpoint hub. So we got started, I forget my timeline, but certainly we were affected by COVID with high costs, and supply chain demand. When you're doing a project that involves, I think we had 26 different sites, and trying to sequence our contractors through, including Highpoint and the hub, it was very difficult to stay on top of things. The sanctuary space, we removed all the pews, and we hope that it will serve well as an event space for the community. Beautiful organ in the back. We have a couple of things that we still have to work on. One is the The acoustics of this space are difficult for us, and we're going to have to spend probably another $250,000 to introduce some softening to the space, but also some more specific technology in terms of speaker. This is in the back of the church. It's part of the original church building, had a high ceiling, and we've been able to redo this space. We're thinking co-working. That has not been the same as we thought that it might have been before COVID, but so we're wondering about how we might repurpose this space. Corner building now has a cheesecake vendor and a coffee vendor on the first floor and some meeting space on the second floor for the community. And then, some of the stained glass windows. There's two different versions of the stained glass. The front windows are of an older version, and then the rest are somewhat newer. This was a gymnasium. We had a sidecar school building. So while the church was built in 1860, I think the sidecar school building was an active elementary school in the city of Newburgh. It was built around 1960. This is the gymnasium that we repurposed. This is upstairs in what we call the LYNC lounge. Again, the high ceilings and some of the stained glass window up high. Again, we see the missing church building, and Audrey Carey Park is now there. This is the furniture that we've added to what we've defined as the LYNC lounge. Some yoga and gong bath work going on in the sanctuary. This was a gala event that was held in the sanctuary space. You can see we're looking back towards the balcony in the rear of the church and the organ. That is also part of our future to fully restore and make that operational. Say we've landed a youth build program that again, with a city that has this kind of abandoned, and to not have a youth build program was somewhat crazy, but we've had it now for 3 years, and it's a program that's going well and serves as sort of the core of the community service hub of Highpoint. Shows our ribbon cutting that we had last year for the thing. So I think I think it's important to identify the use of these spaces. There's a lot of attention right now. In fact, we just came back from the Preservation League of New York, where we won an award for this project. But a lot of people are interested in the old Dutch church in Newburgh, which is, it's a very historic, huge structure. And we've looked at it, and we don't have a use for it. And making sure you have the right use. Working on energy versus historic, we did use historic tax credits, which really our work had to conform to the Secretary of the Interior. We had a couple of issues that we've hit, mostly the acoustics of the sanctuary. When we met with the leaders of the United Methodist Church, they were a little apprehensive. They were disappointed to have to sell the church, but they were committed to that fact that they had to. When they listened to what we were proposing we were at a meeting with them and to try to negotiate this, and when they listened to what we were proposing, a couple of the church members sort of sat back and said, "Oh, you guys are going to do church." And they were, I think, made the sale a little bit easier. This was probably I think we were closer to, I was looking at the development. give you that in a second. We spent more than Jeremy spent, we know that. And yeah, I think I was with the other very similar thing is when we were at the Preservation League on Friday night, Melanie Collins, who heads LYNC and is running our youth build program and has been our partner on revisiting the site, talked about the people preservation as well, the number of folks that have come through with the stories of either going to school there, but being raised in the church and having their weddings and all kinds of their history. And a lot of people have tremendous affection for the church. They participated, they were a part of it. And so we anytime we're able to preserve history from getting close to 200 years old now and make sure that the facilities will be around. As you can see, a church right next door has already been lost. This building will be here 100 or 200 years from now. And we think given its location right on the north side, on the east end of Newburgh, it's going to really provide quite a bit in terms of both commercial and community services for the city of Newburgh and its residents. I think that's it. I can stop sharing.
Great. Well, thank you, Kevin, for that presentation. And I think it's, I'm happy that we have two very different projects that we were able to look at. So one sort of more of a mission-driven organization, repurposing a church, and then in Saugerties, meeting the demand of the office market there. But I think, they both are speaking to something that the community wants and needs, and repurposing and saving in some cases these buildings, for everyone to enjoy in a different way. So let me see if I can just spotlight Kevin and myself. Okay, great. So I have some questions, and I'm gonna try my best to also bring in some of the questions from the chat as well. So one of the questions that was for Jeremy, but I think Kevin, you spoke to a little bit too, was there any discussion to partnering with the congregation on the project? And I think that question kind of could be lumped together with something that I was wanting to ask both of you was if there was any pushback or community hesitancy related to your projects and if you could each sort of speak to how you navigated any fears that might have been raised either by the congregation itself or neighbors or just people who have been used to seeing these buildings used as a church in their community. So I guess we'll go to Jeremy first if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. That's actually a great question. Um, when when we first approached the village about turning it into a brewery called Saugerties Brewing Company, we did get a little bit of resistance to the fact that there was going to be a bar so close to the Boys and Girls Club, which is almost across the street. Um, but once we kind of changed the use of it to a commercial venture, um, people were just so excited that we were going to keep the church. And we talked about demolishing one of the buildings, and they're like, "Well, you're not going to take the church, are you?" Because if some people, one of the reasons why it sat on the market for 4 years is they couldn't really figure out what they wanted to do with it. As Kevin was saying, like you try to find your use. Like what are you doing with this? Yes, it's a beautiful building. I live right in Saugerties, virtually around the corner. So for me, it was kind of taking a piece of our history as a community and restoring it, but as well as a commercial venture for us. Um, but to kind of answer the question, we didn't have any resistance from the congregation because they could barely pay the electric bill, with 9 people left. The pastor lived next door in the parsonage, which he also wanted to sell us, and unfortunately, we didn't have the money at the time, and I'm kicking ourselves now for not buying the parsonage next door. But he wanted to move out of the area, and they knew that they could not afford to stay in it. I mean, the costs were enormous cost to heat that place and electric. So, they knew that they had to get out. And the public the public was, as I said, was just so glad that the building was going to remain as a church. And so, yeah, we didn't have a lot of opposition, put it that way.
Great. And Kevin, I know you spoke to it a little bit, but same question.
Yeah, well, the United Methodist asked to be able to appoint someone to our advisory council, which is a near board member. So Tim Reese, who's been the regional, his exact title is now a great member of our advisory council here at RUPCO. So we've maintained that tie, and I think they felt that that would, keep them involved a little bit with the facility. We were invited to Newburgh by the Newburgh Community Land Bank. They got started a number of years ago. So, and again, our focus was really on affordable housing, but we felt that the opportunity, we were encouraged by the state really to see if we could offer a community hub. And when that came about, we partnered with a local nonprofit, Black-led nonprofit LYNC. So thinking that it would be important for us to have a real local connection in terms of from the community, in terms of moving the project forward and the thoughts about what we would use it for. So we feel like we've had a lot of connection from the participation with the land bank, the continued participation with Tim being on our advisory council from the United Methodist Church, and then again working with LYNC on this project.
Right. Thank you. Jeremy, question for you. You mentioned in your presentation that considering residential as a use in that building wasn't really possible. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on whether that was just something to do with the way that the building was laid out, a functional problem there, or the zoning, or really what was the thought process behind.
Yeah, it really came down to zoning. It is in a residential, an R3, at least to the best of my knowledge, only gave you the ability to have three different residences in there, at least that the zoning in Saugerties anyway. So we maybe could have gotten a variance and changed the zoning, but we didn't really have the time. We did everything that we did was privately funded. Personally, we didn't have there were no government grants. There was no, other than Sawyer Savings helped finance it for us. We were we wanted to get something in it as soon as possible to start paying for itself. So that was the ambition, was we wanted to, we knew commercial buildings as well, because I have 60 tenants in Kingston. So I knew the industry. I knew that it was a need, and I knew how to run it. And my wife and I agreed to operate it commercially, but I would have loved to have done residential. And this was before the real residential boom hit in 2021, 22. When it was quite apparent that there was even more of a need than what I thought. So yeah, if I stuck it out for another year, I probably could have gotten a zoning change based on the need, but we didn't do it. I just didn't have the time.
And that question kind of speaks to a question that we received from the audience here, which I will pose to both of you. So what was your experience with getting the necessary permits from the city and the village, I guess, Village of Saugerties, right here that you're in? So I guess if there was anything that you can think of that was perhaps unique to working within these types of buildings in terms of the whatever permits that you need to get and anything along those lines.
You want to take that, Kevin, or me, or either way?
I can start. I think the city of Newburgh was pretty good to work with. This was an historic property, so we went through the forget the name of the uh, committee that we go in front of in Newburgh for historic review. And of course, we went through the State Office of Historic Preservation before sending it along to the Secretary of the Interior, where we had our scope approved. So I think, yeah, all in all, adaptive reuse, I think the zoning worked for us in terms of the types of proposed uses that we had. And so I would say in the scheme of things and in the realm of all of our development work, this one was in terms of converting the church and school building relatively easy working with the city.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think if we knew what we know now, we may have tried to rework the school building and not have torn it down.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, yes, the building looks much better because the original architect had designed it for not having this building, another building sandwiched next to it. So, but we also lost 10,000 square feet.
Right.
So we were able to pick up some square footage from the original 7,500 to 14,000 square feet, which is what it is now because we added multiple tiers inside the church. Um, but that being said, the village of Saugerties was excellent to work with, right from every single department. The nice thing is the village office is directly across the street. So if I needed a permit, I actually run across the street and get it. The building inspector was excellent to work with. Our building at 32 Partition was two buildings away from the historic district. So things like adding ductless mini splits to the outside of the building never would have happened. We wouldn't be able to really do anything to the outside of the building, or at least what we did now. So we were not part of the historic review, and we didn't fall into any of that, which it did help us a little bit in moving the process along. So we had nothing to wait for. There were no approvals there. The only issue was whether we, from a building, the building inspector, needed to look at everything along the way. But no, everybody was really great to work with, I have to say. Very
Great.
encouraged.
Well, I'm glad that sounds like both of you had positive experiences with
Yes.
the municipalities that you worked in. So I think the takeaway there is hopefully when you come with a good project, the
Right.
municipalities will be willing to sort of work with you and within the confines of their zoning and permitting that they require. So actually sticking with you, Jeremy, I'm going to lump two questions together from the audience. So one was positive cash flow. When did that occur? With all the available structures in the Hudson Valley, what led you to choosing this one? And then I'm also going to add on to that, the cost of the project in Saugerties seems low for what we typically see in this type of reuse project. Was the building envelope in excellent condition? I think you spoke to that a little bit, but I'm going to
Yeah.
lump those together.
Yeah, the building was in fantastic condition. The worst part of the building was the school building that we knocked down. Um, I acted as the general contractor on the entire project. So I saved an enormous amount of money in hiring a contractor. I knew a lot of people that were local. Some of them are relatives that did the site work. One of the relatives from Saugerties, Casey and Sons, did all the site work. Everybody was local that worked on the project, plumbers, electricians. So we weren't importing people from anywhere, and we had a very good reputation for being a good business company, and we were able to get a lot done reasonably. Um, a lot of it, I think, is because my wife and I managed the whole process ourselves. Why? Because my day job, so to speak, was pretty much shut down during the pandemic, doing trade shows and television productions for pharmaceutical companies, which is what that's what I had been doing for 20 years prior to that. So I had a little bit more time. My wife had more time, and we spent a lot of time making the project happen and did a lot of the work. There are days I didn't show you any of the pictures, but there's pictures of me with shovels in hand, working on site with the contractors and doing whatever had to be done to get this project finished. Because our original estimate was obviously less. When you're paying used to estimating $8 a sheet for OSB compared to the 58 that we actually wound up paying. You can see that you can definitely add up cost overruns pretty quickly.
Mhm.
What was the other question? I'm sorry.
I was, it was positive cash flow. When did that occur with all the available structures in the Hudson Valley? What led you to choosing this one?
Yeah, well, this one, as I said, was basically around the corner from my house, so I could not imagine this building falling down, getting knocked down, developed into something, I don't know, maybe a park. I don't know. I couldn't imagine what it would be. So I certainly wanted to save the building. And it's just a perfect location. The architecture is fantastic. It was in the roof structure, everything, the outside was in beautiful shape. All the stained glass. I had one stained glass repair out of, the 40 windows that are in there. Um, the overall infrastructure obviously needed to be replaced, like the mechanicals, but everything else was solid. Not one thing needed to be done with the foundation
Hmm.
or the roof structure. So other than a few repairs of missing shingles, but that's about it. So as far as profitability, we really within the first year we were positive cash flow, mainly because we were able to get it rented so quickly, and um, we did finance it, so um, we were positive within a year, so that was very encouraging.
Sounds like it was a true labor of love, that project.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah. So, these types of adaptive reuse projects, I don't think they're going to be the easiest or most cost-efficient projects, but obviously the outcome, as we've seen with both of these examples, can be so worth it, if the work and effort is been willing to be put up.
Right.
Um, so I actually have a quick functional question for you, Kevin, that came through, which was related to I hesitant to open the can of worms of parking, which could be a whole other webinar topic, which in fact we're thinking about doing. So stay tuned for that. But we had a question from someone who was, looking to do an event at Highpoint, and was, one of the drawbacks there was parking downtown. So is there a plan to sort of address that or, how is that going to function with that event space there?
Yeah, there's always a sacrifice to
Right.
gain access to a sanctuary that beautiful. There's a city lot that's available generally at night, kitty corner block away, not available during the day. And there's a few spaces at High Point, but no, it doesn't, offer parking. I think of the Senate Garage here in Kingston, which is, fabulously successful as a venue. Yeah, and they don't have any parking either. And
Yeah.
we have there ourselves. It goes all the time with wedding and stuff. So but there is a city lot. It is generally available during the evening hours. During the day, it's filled up with workforce.
Great. Thank you for that. And then actually one other I want to scroll all the way back to the top here. This should be a quick one. I think this was for Jeremy. Um, when you were speaking about the materials that you were using, someone just had a quick question about what OSB is. I think you had mentioned that in passing.
OSB is a oriented strand board. It's basically plywood,
Okay.
a fancy word for a particle board.
Okay. That's what I thought too, but I didn't want to, I would let
Yeah.
you take that question. So,
Oh yeah.
um, well, great. Thanks so much to both of you for, sharing your insights here. With 5 minutes left, I'll just I'll just give it back to either of you if you have any sort of closing thoughts about, I think as people, our audience tends to be, municipal officials or potential developers who might be interested in doing this type of project. Any sort of parting thoughts you might have on lessons learned or, best practices for, from both sides of it, whether it's a municipal official, someone on a planning board, town board, who, some of these projects might be coming before them, things they might consider, or, people who might actually be looking to get into doing some of this themselves. Any just closing thoughts for us?
Sure. Yeah, I can say even after all that, I'm still looking for other church buildings to do something similar to. So apparently it didn't scare me off to move forward. Um, I can say don't be afraid of it. Obviously we're in a little bit better time now. There are access to more people and yes, materials are still expensive, but do a lot of research that you can. Some of these religious buildings are a little tricky to work with. Some of them have cemeteries attached to them. What do you do with the cemetery? And what issues are there? And some people are just afraid of them. They're like, well, that's a holy sacred ground. Why are you, putting a nail into it and demolishing this building or so again it's still a building at the end of the day and they're typically built beautifully and they're worth restoring. They really are. It's a part of history that needs to stay here, especially in a village like Saugerties. There are so many absolutely beautiful church buildings and other types of structures. We're so lucky to have these types of buildings between Newburgh, Kingston, Saugerties, Catskill, um, and many other towns. So let's restore these buildings and find uses for them if they're not houses of worship. In fact, you can even do, we thought of potentially lease back, where you have a portion of the building that still can be used as church space, and maybe there could be some kind of shared arrangement worked out where they can still have a small congregation there, but maybe it's shared with other co-work or other commercial ventures. So we just have to look into every possibility, but make sure you have a use for it because it can be expensive for sure.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Kevin?
Well, I saw the one question from Bruce about what we might have done differently. I think we clearly missed the acoustics of the sanctuary space and not realizing that. And I think it's really important. And but we are well on our way to getting the funds to be able to and the technical expertise to really deal with that issue. Yeah, look, I think absent, having the ability to save some costs as Jeremy acting as his own, contractor and all of that, the costs are expensive. The issues of energy, how you deal with energy on these larger buildings, particularly if you're going to try to use some of the sources. We had great partners in terms of folks that funded us. New York State Homes and Community Renewal, of course, is our biggest partner on most of our projects. And so we use some of the government funding. I think buildings can be brought back. I think it's super important. I think you got to make sure you've got sort of the right use. And housing is very strong market for housing. I'm glad to hear that there's such a strong office market for Jeremy. I find that interesting and that's great. Sometimes community service facilities, finding funding and sustainable, dollars to support community service activities could be a little bit more challenging. But if you have the right idea and the right proposed use, this can be really important work to preserve these structures for now and for the future.
Definitely.
Great. Amazing. Well, thank you both again, and thanks everyone for signing on here and spending some lunchtime with us. In just the last minute or two here, just gonna quickly plug an event that Pattern has coming up in 2 weeks from today. We have our Across the Aisle event. We've assembled 4 state lawmakers serving the Hudson Valley region from both sides of the aisle for a discussion on issues that are affecting the region. So, if you're interested in that, again, it's at Marist College 2 weeks from today. Head over to Pattern's website to register. And then just a reminder, the slides and a recording of today's webinar will be made available also on our website in the next couple of days. So one last thank you to our speakers and to Ulster Savings for making this webinar possible, and enjoy the rest of your Monday, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.